So, hello everyone. Welcome to the Global Goddess Fest, where men and women are tuning in from around the world to receive education, connect with global leaders, and gain inspiration on creating the life of their dreams. So, today we have a very special guest, Christina Dunbar, who is here sharing about the storytelling, art, and the female voice, and really stepping into your full expression through these platforms. So Christina Dunbar is a writer, poet, performer, and producer. She's the creator of She Takes the Stage, which is this really powerful program where women work together to get through their voice blockages by writing courageous and personal stories and then sharing them live in a one-night show. So, just think about, if you're watching, like, what would it feel like to get on stage and be the only person on stage and have this whole show geared around your story and your truth. So it's super, super powerful work that she's doing here. And Christine is also the creator of Red, which is a community for female artists and content creators. And currently she's preparing for a tour of her one-woman show, Dirty Me Divine. So I love that title, Dirty Me Divine. I can't wait to hear more about what that is. And thank you so much for being here.
Yay! So fun. Thank you for having me.
And so,
what's up, goddesses? What's up?
And so a friend of mine, a mutual friend of ours, told me about Christina about maybe close to even a year ago. And so I checked out her work and I was like, wow, like, this woman is badass. And so as soon as this came together with the Global Goddess Fest, I was like, I have to get her on stage. And I probably sent her like a million messages. And finally I got a response and I was like, yes, we're doing it. I get to hear more. And within our first phone call, we just totally hit it off. So I'm just so happy to have you here and to share your story with all of our viewers.
Yay. Well, it was like 2 messages, but yes.
I wanted to do more. I was holding back. I was like, okay, universe, come be on my side with this.
No, and thank you for being patient with me with my traveling. And yeah, we connected and it was like, yes, art, expression, festival, dance, music, all of the stuff you're doing is so up my alley. So yeah, we were like, let's do this.
So perfect. And I think a lot of our viewers are in the same spot of really being interested in what is this, the festival vibe and this emergence of the arts and combining it with healing and combining it with communities. So I'm really excited to hear more. So my first question that I have for you is basically, what was that inspiration or thing that went off that said, hey, I should really look at combining the arts and specifically the performance arts with the healing world?
Yeah, well, I grew up as a ballet dancer, and so I was really into the arts from a young age, and I thought I was going to be this prima ballerina, and I spent so many of my days dedicated to dance. And then at 16 years old, like overnight, literally, it felt like overnight, I grew double D's. Hello. And you can't be a ballerina with double D's. And so I felt really at that time like my body had betrayed me. And I felt like I got really lost. I had a total breakdown. I didn't know it at the time, but I was depressed. I didn't know what I was going to do. Like, it was a total crisis, the dark night of the soul, but at 16 years old, and I didn't really even know what a dark night of the soul was. I just knew that my identity was completely shattered. And I ended up a few years later moving to Los Angeles from Seattle, which is where I had been living, and came to LA. And I was like, okay, it might not be ballet, but maybe it'll be like acting and performing and something with expression. And I started to get into that, but what happened for me was I felt really small. I felt powerless. I felt very much like I had to be a certain way for the male lens because I was in Hollywood, which is basically run by men. I was auditioning for men. I was meeting managers and producers, and the whole like Me Too movement. I could really relate to so much of that. Just casting couch stuff and really not having a voice at that time and feeling like I was this good girl, this perfect, nice, sweet, want to please you. And also I felt like validated when the men would say, hey, you're so cute, or you're bubbly, or you're, yeah, like I'll represent you. But I also knew it wasn't, they couldn't see the full expression of me. So I ended up leaving that world of Hollywood. And that was really when I started my own healing journey and getting into personal growth, because on top of feeling like I didn't have a voice, I was also going through really strong ovarian pain. And I started reading up about women's bodies and how we have all these energetic centers and what different centers are connected to. And like the ovaries are part of your creativity. They're also part of shame. And I had a lot of shame, just a lot. I also, at that time, became an exotic dancer. I started stripping to make money. And so I was like this good girl in my life. But then at night, I was this naughty, nasty girl. Still didn't feel like I had a voice, but yet was dancing for men. So there was just a lot of shame around that and a lot of confusion around my own sexuality and what it meant and how to feel powerful about it and not feel like how to use it in a way that I felt good about and that could attract men possibly, but not for that purpose. Feel good about it and use it because it is a powerful thing to be connected to your sexual, sensual, feminine self. So I really started to explore all of that. And to answer this question that you posed in a very long way, I wanted to give you a snapshot of all of that, because once my healing journey started and I started to take a look at voice and sexuality, which I felt was very connected, like being blocked around myself as a woman and my sexual centers, I also felt blocked around being to speak up for myself as a woman, like if that makes any sense. So I realized that a lot of the healing had to come from me using my voice. And the best way I knew how to use my voice was through art and expression. And so I started to write my story around feeling ashamed and my whole journey with dance and body and boobs and stripping and money and all of that stuff. And I started to share bits and pieces of that. And it was so freeing to fucking tell the truth about my life and what I was afraid of and my pain around being a girl and a woman and all the things I felt like I couldn't talk about when I was a teenager that I had stuffed down. Like I never really talked about my boobs with my mom or what that meant or why men started to look at me funny or any of that stuff. So putting all of that in a story and using art to transmute the pain, to heal the pain, to find my own way through writing, to find the story I wanted to tell and the ending that I wanted to write for that chapter of my life was just incredible on so many levels. So I remember like knowing that that wasn't just for me. So many women, and I work specifically with women, but of course men too have this, but so many women have a story that they have locked up inside, that they feel ashamed about, that they feel like no one can relate to, that they feel like they're all alone. And what if we told our stories? That was the question. Like, what if we started to tell our stories in a safe space? That became an offering, and it was the most beautiful healing gift for myself and the women that I witnessed in their expression. So I could go on, but I'll just give you all of that as like the history of where it started and where it began.
Totally. So I'm curious with how you create that sort of safe space, because I know through the work that I've done and other women that I've been interviewing and talking to, it can go so far back. It's not even just, from our childhood or from our mother, but it can go all the way back to witches being burned at the stake and not being able to speak up and like having that fear of our lives. And we're like in today's modern world, and it's like, why am I feeling this? No one's going to burn me at the stake now, but it's still like engraved in our DNA. So how do you, when you have these women that come to you that are, wanting to speak up and share their story, how do you create that sort of safe space for them to really feel like they can finally let go?
Yeah. Brene Brown has a quote. You can feel, what's the quote? You can have courage or you can have comfort, but you can't have both at the same time. And that's the quote that really sets the container for the women that I work with, because I can relate to that fear. And I used to say that I was so afraid of speaking up that I feel like it would kill me. Like I would be burned at the stake. I would use that phrase, not really knowing what it was about. And then of course I did my history searches and found out why I was even saying that. But I would feel heart palpitations and I would feel like I wanted to jump out of my body and not be in my body anytime I had to speak up and be vulnerable. And so I can relate to all of that. And I know what that feels like and I know how scary that is. And a lot of the work that we do in a container for this program, obviously it's not about just going from meeting the women to like going on stage overnight and sharing. It's a very step-by-step process, and it starts off by creating safety in a circle, which most facilitators have learned how to do that. And there's all sorts of ways to do that by setting up agreements between the women and what is safe in the space. And one of the best ways I know to create safe space is by being really vulnerable myself and sharing like what's on my heart in the moment in that space, and sharing why it's important to be vulnerable, why it's important to tell our stories so women can really start to understand why they must do this. Like what's even the point of going through this painful thing where you feel like you're gonna shatter and be killed, right? Like some women feel that. What's the point? And the point is freedom. It's freedom. It's a knowing that your story matters, that every story matters. It's a knowing that you were given a voice, to use that voice, to not hide it. It's a knowing that we create a domino effect that was seen actually in the Me Too movement. I always say when one woman is brave enough and bold enough to speak her truth, it opens something up and allows another woman to do the same. And that's what we see a lot of in the circle, is like one woman will go and will be super brave and will share something really private, and it does something for the whole group and opens everybody's hearts to just like whoosh, go in there. So it happens that way in the group. And I really make sure to curate a safe space when they go on stage. We talk a lot about who and when and how do you share a story, because if you haven't healed the story within yourself and you're in a very fragile and wounded place, a lot of women talk about things like sexual assault. They talk about abuse. They talk about virginity. There's some really personal stuff that is not necessarily right to share with the public until you yourself have come to a place of feeling some kind of resolve around it yourself, where there's some kind of shift where it's like if one person comments and it's not like you're amazing and I love you, and it's something might not even be harsh but just doesn't agree with you in some way, that it won't kill you, because we want to slowly expand so that we can keep going. Sometimes when you expand too big and you're not ready for it and you don't have the strength or the space to be in your center, and someone rejects you, and in this time of like social media where there's so much exposure to other people's opinions, you have to be really, really careful. So I make sure to curate a very safe space in the theater, and it's all love. It's all love. And that creates a deeper healing where they can then feel like, oh, maybe I can share this with more people, and step by step, right? Like first I'll share it with the group, and then I'll share it with a friend, and then I'll share it with the curated theater audience, and then maybe I'll go to do an open mic. And that's how it sort of evolves for the women that participate.
I love that. So the big word that comes to my mind is just patience, and
Mhm.
almost like having, really having this non-judgment towards yourself and towards your story, and letting it unfold in its own time, and not trying to rush into it and be like, here's my story.
No, because you don't want to put the pressure of the audience holding. This is what I believe. You don't want to put the pressure of the audience holding a story for you where it feels unresolved. And they, at least for me, I don't want my audience to walk away in pain. I want them to. I really love to see a woman go from that place of maybe she's still feeling victimized in some way, but how can we make this your own heroine's journey and share the pain. It's not about bypassing any of that. Share it, let it go. Use art to express the rage, to express the grief. And then also, what happens now? What's the next step? And to get to that place where you feel like, I'm good. I went through this, but it doesn't define me. I went through this and it gave me some kind of wisdom. I went through this and I am stronger because of it. And so to get to that kind of place is sort of how we move in the program. So once the women are on stage, it's not like, and I just don't know what to do. It's not a therapy session. It's a healing. So it's using art to, and I love using storytelling to write the next part of our story. What is the next chapter? Not just about what happened in the past. What's the future holds? What are the superpowers that you received because you went through this? You know, for me personally, I remember very clearly there was a point in my life when I was stripping and I was so over it and I hated myself. I felt so trapped. I didn't know how to get out of it. I literally just belittled myself in my head over and over and over again. And I remember at one point I was getting ready to go to Vegas, take my trip because that's where I was dancing, flying from LA to Vegas. And I had just finished reading this book by Carolyn Mace, who is a spiritual teacher that I love some of her work. And I remember thinking, I'm gonna fucking use this part of my life. This is not just for me. I'm not going through this pain for just to go through it. Like, I'm going to use everything that I have gone through in this journey, all the pain, the shame I felt around my body, around my sexuality, and I'm going to touch other women somehow with it. I don't know how right now, but that I know that that's my truth. I'm making that decision in this moment. And it was like something shifted for me where I understood I didn't have to keep this story to myself. I could use it in a way that actually felt good to me at some point in the future, even though I didn't know what that would look like. And that I couldn't be the only person going through the struggle. And why keep it to myself? You know? So there's so much that we can do with our stories. And yeah, part of the healing is to find what are the gems, what are the superpowers, because I felt like I was given certain superpowers. Like, yeah, I was wounded in that journey. And what else did I learn? What else did I learn about my sexuality? What else did I learn about how I did or did not use my voice? What did I learn about boundaries? What did I learn about consent? There's all this learning for me. So I started to really look at that stuff to see what I could take with me somehow to get out of the situation, to move into my next chapter. What could I take with me that I could then grow and offer to others and connect? That's what storytelling does. It connects us. And I feel like that's what we're all looking for right now is human connection. One of the best and most powerful ways is through art, is through what you do, music and story and dance and seeing each other, really seeing each other. And that's what vulnerability does. That's the why. Why do you tell your story? So I can connect to someone out there and say, you're not alone. We're more alike than we are different. Yeah.
I love that. So when you were in, so you, when you had this, epiphany of like, okay, like I'm doing this for something greater than myself, something outside of that. What were the steps that you took to, getting to the point where you were like, okay, this is my profession, this is what I'm bringing to the world, this is what I'm offering? And like, what was that like? Because I could imagine that would be one of the tougher times in your career, is making that, once you have the idea, then how do you take the action steps?
It was slow. And I will say that that moment was when I, in my personal journey, went from victim to heroine. I became my own heroine because I actually found the purpose in that story at that time. So that was a huge moment, and things did not shift overnight. There were still plenty of nights where I was like, I hate myself, and here we go again. And it was slow and abrupt at the same time. So I'll tell you what that means. It was slow because I just began to do a lot of reading and writing and my own inner work, meditation and journaling and asking my body questions. And so that part for me was a long process, and it still goes on. It's never ending. But the abrupt part was when I quit the club. And this is actually in my show. And I quit because I had a horrible, horrible experience with a customer where I was very, very violated. And in my show, I literally like turn to the customer and I say, no, I like scream this no that lasts forever. And on stage, I didn't do it that long in the club, but on stage to be like, no, I'm not going to do it right now. And just to have the whole theater be filled with that scream every time I do it, it feels so awesome. But I felt so violated that day in the club. And after years of not knowing how, or blah, blah, I'm not going to quit, I don't have anything lined up, blah, blah, I don't know what to do, I literally just walked out and I was like, I am done. I'm done. That's it. And in the meantime, I had been, like I said, going through this slow process of journaling and writing, and I got my certification to become a dream coach, which was to help people look at not their nighttime dreams, but the things they want to create and what comes up when you're trying to create all the doubt and the how do you create tangible goals and how do you move forward. So I had some things under my belt at that time, and I had started also doing goddess circles right around that time. And I remember my first one, like nobody showed up, just like going through all that stuff, going through the motions. But once I really committed, there was momentum. And I started off with a company called Bye Bye Good Girl. I've been partnering with someone else, started a personal growth company, worked my ass off with my business partner. We were working 24/7 to get this company off the ground, to do all the marketing, and that ended up growing. And then I ended up leaving it because I felt like my artist was calling me. And I was like, everything I've learned in personal growth, how can I also combine it with the art? And yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but it was a step-by-step process. Yeah. And also just to speak to the voice stuff for anybody who has like fear. I also think artists, it's so common to have fear. Like it's such a weird thing for other people to hear, oh, you perform on stage and you also are afraid of it. Like I always think that people that use their voice are actually really confident. And I say that artists are some of the most sensitive, tender-hearted people. And it's not, we label it as fear. And this is another thing I've learned, that all of that energy is just energy. And I used to feel overwhelmed by that energy, and it would feel so big that I would shrink from it. And that's why I felt like I couldn't use my voice. And what I've learned is how to actually use that energy to not be afraid of the fear. I know we've all heard fear is excitement without the breath. So it's excitement, it's energy, it's an activation, and I can use it and dive into it instead of feeling like I'm overpowered by it. Ride it like a surfer, as this big ocean wave, ride it and use it, put it into my voice. My voice might shake, my fingers might tremble, and that's okay. And so part of that journey as well in those years of really finding myself was to, despite the fear, use that voice. And I was really aware of using it at every opportunity possible. For instance, I'd go to a gathering. Usually I'd be the last person to speak, or I wouldn't speak at all. So I would raise my hand first when it was like time to open up the group. And that felt really scary. But I start with things like that, or I'd go to an open mic where I knew people and it felt small and intimate, and I would share something there and really get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That was my motto at that time. The big shift was, in terms of using my voice, was facing my fears head on, being with the fear in terms of that stuff. I know like some fear is telling you to run the other direction and you want to listen to that. I'm talking specifically about all of the energy that comes up when we're about to share ourselves with the world.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Mm. Yeah, I think that's definitely just the scariest part. And, how do we find that comfortability, and how do we remind ourselves when we're in that like anxious place? Okay, this doesn't have to be totally terrifying. Like, breathe through it, get through.
And it might be terrifying. That's the word we use, but what if we could just be with that energy and be like, actually, this is what I'm feeling right now, and it's okay. It's a signal that my body is alive. It's a signal that my body is feeling electric right now. It's a signal that I'm ready. Why can't we look at it that way? It's a signal that I'm ready. There's like all of this fresh energy rushing through me. Why can't that be a sign that I'm actually ready to go? And you don't think of it that way because our society is so conditioned to run away from any kind of feeling at all, any kind of sensation in this body, if we're not like laid back and chill. Mm-hmm. This society says something's wrong with you, or you gotta breathe that shit out, or whatever, like feelings are okay. Doesn't mean that we have to run for them. It doesn't mean that we have to shut down our voice. It's okay to feel these sensations. So that was like huge for me, to be okay with that. And I still get afraid. Again, that's the term. But I still have electric energy running through my body. Sometimes I feel like I don't know what I'm going to do before I get on stage. It's just so much. And I just have to remind myself, be in the moment. Mm-hmm. Be in my body. Instead of getting up in my head about it, and this means I can't do this, or this means I'm afraid, or just be with it and feel it and take it with me on that stage, because that's power to give to all of the people that are in the audience. You're giving them power.
Totally. So the women that have, gone through this process and have really stepped into their power, what are some of the key takeaways that they have after doing their first show, or, singing their first song, doing their first dance, telling their first story?
Oh, wow. It's pretty major. It's so much fun to see the process and what happens after. I can give you examples. I had a woman who was so afraid to share anything about herself and her voice. And she did the program and then decided, she had implants at that time, breast implants. She decided to get rid of them right after she did the program. And this is someone who I don't think would normally talk about this stuff. And she became so vocal, talking about her body, talking about what happened for her in particular with the implants, and how it was so toxic to her own body. And it was so visible and so vocal and so out there and so inspiring and so real and so raw and so unapologetic. So that was beautiful. I had a woman, wow, this was mystical what happened for this woman. She talked about being sexually assaulted by her stepfather, and she came out here. She was living in San Francisco or near that area, came out here to perform, and we ended up rehearsing at this park, which happened to be, she had no idea, happened to be but by the same house where this assault had happened, because she used to live in this area. No idea. It was all like, whoa, what? And so she shares this story on stage that she's never shared publicly. And she says to me afterwards, I feel like a chapter of my book has been closed, that have been waiting to close. I mean, because it happened years and years and years ago, probably like, I don't know, I don't want to, like 20 years ago, all of the stuff that she'd been through. And then she finds out after not talking about it for 20 years and after doing the show, by accident, she finds out for someone else that this person who had abused her had passed away years ago. She didn't know, but it was like more completion. It was this energetic completion that she put into motion. I get goosebumps talking about it because it's so eerie. So that's another example of someone who just had a completion around something. It was done, like truly done for her. There's lots of other stories, women asking for raises at work and taking that voice stuff into other areas of their life and having better relationships, having better auditions as actresses and really standing for their worth. So lots of really beautiful stuff to witness.
That's amazing. Wow. Well, and so you brought today with you an exercise for our viewers to do while they're watching to call out and see what their story could be. If you want to share a little bit more, we'll dive into this exercise.
Yeah, so this is, I basically take the women that go through She Takes the Stage through these questions. And the way we first approach it is sort of this rapid fire stream of consciousness writing. And I have basically 21 prompts, which I'm going to give you today. So you can pause this recording, get out, whenever you're ready, get out a piece of paper, journal, pencil. You could even light a candle, whatever you want to do to set up some space for yourself. And I'm going to give you these prompts, but I'm not really going to pause after each one, because what I want you to do is to pause this recording after you hear the prompt and just write. Try not to edit. Try to let everything that comes through. Part of what we do as women a lot is we edit what we're going to say. So I don't want you to edit this. It's only for your eyes. And I'll give you the questions first, and then I'll just have a couple of things I want to add afterwards. So here we go. Let me open up this file. All right. All right. Yeah, and I did have this on here. So another thing you could do before you start is to really get into your body, and you might want to do some deep breaths or even some belly dancing to move your hips. Those are all ways to get into, great ways to kind of just get into the body and actually create some space to write before you just sit down at the page. And just trust what's coming through for you. There's no right or wrong here. So this is specifically for finding what it is your personal story might be. If you're someone that shares your story at work, or you're someone that wants to share your story on a stage, these are all beautiful questions for your artist to tap into. All right. So the first prompt is, I secretly wish I could speak about this. I secretly wish I could speak about this. And again, you'll just pause this recording and write whatever comes to mind. Second prompt, I've always wanted to be a stand for this issue. I've always wanted to be a stand for this issue. Next prompt, I want to release the shame of this experience and turn it into my hero's journey. I want to release the shame of this experience and turn it into my hero's journey. Next question. If my life was a legend, I'd share how I turned this pain into a superpower. If my life was a legend, I'd share how I turned this pain into my superpower. Next question. Next prompt. This part of my story has never had a voice. This part of my story has never had a voice. Next prompt. If I took off my mask, I would talk about this. If I took off my mask, I would talk about this. Next prompt. I get pissed off and fired up when I think about this. I get pissed off and fired up when I think about this. Next prompt. I'm scared shitless to talk about this. I'm scared shitless to talk about this. Next prompt. If Unapologetic showed up on the stage, she'd have this to say. So in other words, if the unapologetic part of me showed up on that stage to tell my story, she'd have this to say. Next prompt. The most daring thing I could possibly share is. The most daring thing I could possibly share is. Next prompt. If you really knew me, you'd know that my deepest fear is this. If you really knew me, you'd know that my deepest fear is this. Next prompt. I don't have closure or empowerment around this past story, but I'm ready to rewrite the ending in a way that supports me. I don't have closure or empowerment around this past story, but I'm ready to rewrite the ending in a way that supports me. Next prompt. If my inner badass showed up on stage, she'd say this. If my inner badass showed up on that stage, she'd say this. That could just be a couple phrases, something that your badass wants to say to the world. Next prompt. If no one could reject me, I would say this. If no one could reject me or hurt me, I would say this. Next prompt. Deep down, I sense I am a messenger for. Next prompt. If I died tomorrow and never spoke up about this, I'd regret it. Next prompt. I hide this part of myself and I'm ready to share it. Next prompt. I'm tired of feeling shame because of this story. Next prompt. I want to heal my relationship with, fill in the blank, my body, my partner, my health. I want to heal my relationship with. Next prompt. If I told you my secrets, you'd know that. Fill in the blank. If I told you my secrets, you'd know this about me. And last fun prompt. The truth is, if I unshackled, unlocked, and unleashed my artist, I know what she wants to talk about and how she wants to feel. My artist is dying to talk about this. Okay, so you'll probably notice a theme with those prompts. They're asking pretty vulnerable questions and going to the heart of some of your stories. And so what I ask women to do, and we really take a look at this afterwards, we look for common themes, we look for ways to connect the dots, we look for whatever they answered, which are their top 3 that feel really like they're speaking to them, and it's the time right now, because sometimes you have something that you feel you're afraid to talk about it and it's not the time. But for many of the women, the work that we do is really about how do we make it the time to talk about the things that you're afraid to talk about, the things that feel really vulnerable, because that's where the healing is. I find that all of the women that I work with, when we go there to those places that are dark and repressed and actually create stories around those pieces, is where the most breakthrough healing and empowerment comes. But I don't necessarily recommend doing that work on your own unless you're ready, or you're an artist that already is like, yeah, I'm used to getting in touch with my feelings and sharing this. So it is a sacred process, and this could be just a fun exploration for you to check out what's coming through. So I hope you enjoy it. That's what I have.
Thank you so much, Christina.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think those questions are so powerful. And yeah, even to just start sparking some ideas and maybe releasing something just in writing that you've never even wrote down before. So very powerful.
Yes, it's so powerful if I could just add that piece to write down the things that you feel afraid to write down. I write down my fears all the time, the things I don't want to talk about, and use the page as a sacred container to hold that. Um, and also be careful. Like if it's really deep and you feel a lot of fear around something, do this in conjunction with therapy or with coaching, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if it feels like something's being brought up through these questions, make sure that you find a way to work through that and someone that can help you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming and joining the Global Goddess Fest and
Mm.
sharing your work with us. I know it's just so powerful and transformative, and there's so many voices that are being unleashed and heard right now in what's happening in today's world. So, just giving that power back to people that need help to say what they need to say and stand up for themselves. Super
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me. That was really fun.
Awesome. So, everyone, we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.